Amara had always been the kind of woman people admired from a distance. In the busy city of Lagos, she worked long hours at a fashion company, pouring her creativity and energy into every design. She was the first to arrive and often the last to leave, and her dedication never went unnoticed. Everyone at the office knew she was next in line for a big promotion. For Amara, it wasn't just about the title. It was about finally seeing her years of hard work recognized. She dreamed of calling her mother to say, "Mama, I made it." But just when her breakthrough was within reach, the ground was pulled from under her. Her cousin Chiamaka, someone she had grown up with like a sister, quietly poisoned the air with lies. She whispered to the bosses that Amara was unreliable, that she wasn't a team player, that her success came from taking credit for other people's work. Lies so sharp they cut deeper than a knife. Amara didn't know what was happening until the day of the announcement. The position she had sacrificed so much for was handed to Chiamaka instead. The betrayal didn't end at the office. At home, her family celebrated Chiamaka's new role like she was a queen. There were cheers, dancing, and endless congratulations. No one asked Amara how she felt. She stood in the corner, her chest heavy, watching her cousin bask in glory that wasn't her. That night, lying awake in her small room, she whispered to herself, "I never imagined the person I called sister would stab me in the back." Amara cried for nights after losing the promotion. The humiliation burned in her chest every time she thought about it. She replayed the moment again and again, her cousin smiling proudly while she stood in the shadows, forgotten. It felt like the end of everything she had worked for. At first, she wanted to quit completely, to pack away her sewing machine and never touch fabric again. But deep inside, another voice kept whispering, "This is not your ending. You are meant for more." Slowly, that whisper grew louder than her pain. One morning, after wiping her tears, Amara made a decision that would change everything. If they would not give her a place at the table, she would build her own. She would start her own fashion brand, one that carried her heart and her culture. She wanted to design clothes that told African stories, bright fabrics, bold patterns, styles that celebrated who she was. It sounded impossible at first, but the thought gave her strength. The road ahead was nothing like the glittering dream in her mind. She had no savings, no investors, and no powerful connection. Her tiny room in Yaba became her workshop. She borrowed an old sewing machine and bought just a few yards of fabric with the little money she had left. Every stitch felt like a prayer, every design a small rebellion against the people who said she was finished. But her struggles didn't end with money. Her family, the same ones who once praised her cousin, laughed at her new idea. "Fashion brand? With what money?" some scoffed. "You'll give up soon, just watch," others whispered. Their words were daggers, but Amara refused to let them pierce her spirit. She smiled even when her heart hurt, telling herself, "They don't have to believe in me. I will believe in myself." There were nights she went hungry because every naira went into fabric. There were days she almost collapsed from exhaustion after sewing late into the night and still waking up before dawn to sketch new design. People mocked her for wasting her time, saying she was chasing shadows. But each insult only made her fire burn brighter. She told herself again and again, "I will rise even if I rise alone." It was not easy, but Amara began to carry her pain differently. The betrayal no longer crushed her, it pushed her. The lies that once broke her now became fuel for her dreams. Every design she made was proof that she was not defeated, that she was more than the gossip and the humiliation. She was determined to turn her scars into strength, and even though she stood alone, she stood tall. Amara's room in Yaba became more than just four walls and a bed. It turned into a factory of dreams. Fabric was stacked in neat piles against the wall. Her sewing machine sat by the window, and her sketchbook was always within reach. She worked late into the night, with only the buzzing of her machine and the hum of Lagos traffic in the distance keeping her company. The room was small, hot, and sometimes uncomfortable, but in her eyes it was the beginning of something great. At first, she only made clothes for friends and neighbors. She poured her creativity into every piece, using bright Ankara prints and unique cuts that made people stop and stare. Each outfit carried her signature touch, something fresh yet deeply African. She didn't have a store or fancy models, so she started posting photos of her work on social media. She begged her friends to wear her designs and take pictures in them. She styled herself too, standing in front of her mirror with her phone, snapping photos and writing small captions about the meaning behind each design. Slowly, something began to happen. Strangers started commenting on her posts, asking, "Where can I get this?" Orders trickled in, and then they doubled. Word spread about the young designer from Yaba, who was doing something different. Amara's page grew, and with it came attention she had never expected. People who once mocked her now whispered about her success. Some even pretended they had always supported her. One afternoon, she received a message from a small investor who loved her vision. At first, Amara thought it was a scam. But when they met in person, the woman looked her in the eyes and said, "Your designs carry a soul. I believe in you." That meeting opened doors. Slowly, others joined in, offering to fund her work and help her grow. It wasn't millions, but it was enough to expand her production beyond the walls of her little room. Yet, while Amara was quietly rising, Chiamaka continued to gloat at every family gathering. She dressed in expensive clothes, spoke loudly about her achievements, and made sure everyone knew she had taken the promotion Amara once dreamed of. She looked at Amara with mocking eyes, as if to remind her of her place. Family members laughed at Chiamaka's jokes and clapped at her stories, while Amara stayed quiet, smiling softly, never letting her cousin see her pain. But beneath that silence was a fire that no one could put out. Amara no longer needed to argue or explain herself. She let her work speak. Every new design, every new customer, every supportive comment online was her quiet response to betrayal. She carried herself with a calm determination, knowing the day would come when the tables would turn. The invitation came on a quiet afternoon when Amara was busy stitching in her small Yaba room. She almost thought it was a mistake. A fashion expo in Abuja had reached out, asking her to showcase her designs among some of the best in the industry. At first, she laughed nervously and reread the email 3 times. Was this real? Her hands trembled as she whispered, "Me? Out of all people, me?" The weeks that followed were some of the hardest of her life. She didn't have a big team or endless money like the other designers who would be there. What she had was vision, passion, and a stubborn heart that refused to give up. She poured herself into every design, sketching late into the night, sewing until her fingers hurt, and redoing entire outfits if they didn't feel perfect. Her room became a battlefield of fabric, needles, and endless coffee cups. Each dress carried a piece of her story, the pain of betrayal, the strength of survival, and the beauty of African pride. When the day finally came, Amara packed her collection carefully and boarded a bus to Abuja. She felt small among the established names at the expo. Some designers looked at her like she didn't belong, but Amara kept her head high. She reminded herself, "I came this far. I will not shrink now." Her turn came, and as the lights hit the runway, her models stepped out in bold, colorful pieces that told stories of Lagos streets, Yoruba traditions, and modern African elements. The room grew quiet at first, then whispers began. By the time the final model walked out, there was no silence left, only clapping, then cheering, and finally a standing ovation that echoed in her ear. Amara stood backstage, tears filling her eyes. For the first time, she felt truly seen. That night, newspapers carried her story. Headlines read, "Young designer from Lagos wins hearts in Abuja." Photos of her designs filled blogs and magazines, and her name spread faster than she could ever imagine. Strangers began calling her the rising star, and orders flooded her inbox like never before. Back in Lagos, her family saw the news. Some were stunned into silence. Others started calling her with fake smiles in their voices. Even Chiamaka couldn't ignore it. At the next family gathering, while Chiamaka boasted about her office job, whispers about Amara's standing ovation filled the room. Though Amara stayed humble and quiet, inside she knew a new chapter had begun. It wasn't yet the full picture of success, but it was the seed. The moment that proved to her, and to everyone else, that she wasn't just chasing shadows. She was building something real, something powerful. And this was only the beginning. Chiamaka had always walked into family gatherings with her head held high, expecting all the attention to be on her. For a while she was the cousin with the big job, the one everyone admired, the one people pointed to as successful. But slowly, she started noticing something that unsettled her. Amara's name was being mentioned more and more. At first, it was just small comments. An aunt would say, "Did you see that dress Amara made? It was beautiful." An uncle would add, "Her designs were in the paper." Oh, Chiamaka tried to laugh it off, but deep down it bothered her. She had worked hard to steal the spotlight once, and now it was slipping through her fingers. In her office, things weren't as bright as they once seemed. The company she worked for was struggling, and the pressure on her was mounting. Projects failed, targets weren't being met, and the same bosses who once favored her now raised their eyebrows at her mistakes. The glow of her stolen promotion was starting to fade. Meanwhile, Amara's face appeared on social media, in blogs, in magazines. Fashion lovers shared her designs, calling her the pride of Lagos. Invitations to events kept coming her way. Slowly, family members who once mocked her began to switch sides. They praised her resilience, telling her, "We always knew you would shine." Chiamaka could hardly believe her ears. It was as if everyone had forgotten she was the one who once stood at the top. Jealousy brewed inside her like a storm. Each time Amara entered a room, heads turned. Each time her name was mentioned, Chiamaka's chest tightened. She started whispering bitter comments, hoping to cut her cousin down in front of others. "It's just luck," she sneered one evening. "She can't keep this up forever. Fashion trends come and go." Soon, people will forget her. But even as she tried to dismiss Amara's success, the truth gnawed at her. The more she spoke against her cousin, the more people defended Amara. Family members who once ignored Amara now shut Chiamaka down with sharp looks. She noticed the shift and hated it. At home, she vented to her husband, Obinna, pacing the living room late at night. "They think she's better than me now," she complained. "Me, who worked so hard. Do they not see she's just getting lucky? This will not last." But even as she spoke, her voice trembled with fear. Amara, on the other hand, said nothing. She didn't respond to Chiamaka's comments, didn't fight for attention, didn't try to prove herself at family gathering. Her silence made her cousin's bitterness even louder. She had learned that success speaks on its own, and she let her work carry the message. And though Chiamaka refused to admit it, deep in her heart she knew. Amara was no longer the cousin she once mocked. She was becoming a force, and no amount of jealousy could stop it. Amara's company was no longer just a dream stitched together in her small Yaba room. It had grown into a real business with an office, a team, and clients who trusted her vision. Every day, new orders came in, and she realized she could no longer do everything by herself. She needed skilled people, designers, managers, marketers, to help take her brand even further. For the first time, she opened up job applications. Within days, her inbox was flooded with resumes. One evening, while sipping tea and going through the stack, her eyes froze on a familiar name. Obinna. She read it again, just to be sure. It was Chiamaka's husband, her cousin's husband, the same cousin who had stabbed her in the back and stolen her promotion. At first, she thought her eyes were playing tricks on her, but there it was in black and white. His CV was detailed, filled with years of experience in business management. He was clearly looking for work. Amara leaned back in her chair, her heart pounding. For a long moment, she just stared at the paper, torn between disbelief and a strange sense of irony. Of all the people who could apply, why him? Destiny had a way of circling back, and this felt like life itself was handing her the power she once lost. She thought back to the nights she cried herself to sleep because of Chiamaka's betrayal. The family gatherings where she was humiliated, the mockery, the whispers. Now here she was, the boss, holding her cousin's husband's future in her hand. The thought was almost overwhelming. A battle began inside her. One part of her wanted to throw the application aside. Why should she help him? Why should she give her cousin's family a chance to benefit from her success? Let him struggle the way she once struggled. Let him face rejection. He was married to the woman who laughed while she was in pain. But another part of her whispered different. What if this was not just about revenge, but about proving something bigger? What if showing grace was her true victory? Hiring Obinna would mean Chiamaka would have to watch her husband work under the very cousin she once mocked. It would mean the tables had turned completely, but without Amara needing to dirty her hands with pettiness. She closed her eyes and whispered to herself, "Do I let him suffer? Or do I show him who I have become?" The decision weighed heavy, but deep down, she knew what she had to do. Her brand was built on strength and resilience, not bitterness. This was her chance to rise above the betrayal and show that success tastes even sweeter when mixed with dignity. The next morning, Amara picked up Obinna's application again. She didn't smile, she didn't frown. She simply whispered, "Destiny has brought us here for a reason." Amara decided to hire Obinna. She didn't do it out of pity, and she didn't do it to spite Chiamaka either. She did it because he was qualified, and her growing company needed someone who could handle business management. From the very first day, she made it clear. This was strictly professional. She treated him like every other employee, giving him responsibilities and holding him accountable. To her surprise, Obinna worked hard and respected her leadership. He never once tried to bring up the family connection, and Amara respected him. But the peace didn't last. When Chiamaka found out her husband was working under Amara, it was as if a fire had been lit inside her. She couldn't believe it. To her, it felt like the ultimate humiliation. The cousin she once mocked was now her husband's boss. She stormed into family gatherings with anger boiling in her chest, making sharp comments, trying to mask her insecurity. The tension reached its peak one Sunday afternoon during a family meeting. Relatives had gathered in their parents' compound, chatting and eating, when Chiamaka finally exploded. She stood up in the middle of the room, her voice trembling with rage. "So this is what you wanted, Amara? You stole him from me. First you wanted my place. Now you've taken my husband too." Her words cut through the air like knives. The room fell silent. Plates stopped clattering, conversations froze, and all eyes turned to Amara. Some relatives gasped, others shook their heads, waiting to see how she would respond. Amara, sitting calmly with her hands folded in her lap, didn't raise her voice. She didn't flinch. She simply looked at Chiamaka with steady eyes and said, "I didn't steal him. He applied for a job and I gave him one. That's what leaders do." Chiamaka's face twisted in fury. "Don't act innocent. You've always envied me. You couldn't stand that I was chosen over you. Now you want to take everything from me. Her words were bitter, almost desperate. Amara's voice stayed calm, almost too calm for the storm in the room. No, Chiamaka. Let's not rewrite history. You stole from me first. You stole my promotion with lies. You took what I earned with hard work. But unlike you, I don't destroy people to climb higher. I build. That's the difference between us. The silence that followed was heavy. Family members exchanged uneasy glances. Some nodded slowly, realizing the truth in Amara's word. Others avoided Chiamaka's eyes, embarrassed by her outburst. For the first time, she stood there not as the shining star of the family, but as someone exposed, her insecurities laid bare. Amara didn't linger on the moment. She rose from her seat, adjusted her dress, and said softly, I don't need to fight you, Chiamaka. My success speaks for itself. Then she walked out, leaving her cousin standing there, shaking with anger and shame. That day, the tables officially turned. Amara's company was no longer just a rising brand in Lagos. It was becoming a name people recognized across Africa and beyond. Her bold, African-inspired designs caught the attention of international buyers. She was invited to showcase her work in fashion weeks abroad. Magazines wrote about her as the young woman reshaping African fashion. Awards followed, each one validating the years of struggle and sacrifice. Every time Amara stood on a stage, accepting recognition, she remembered the girl who once cried in her small room after being betrayed. Now that girl had turned her pain into power. Her company expanded into a proper headquarters, with a showroom that sparkled with creativity. Celebrities began wearing her designs, and influencers posted about her work. Orders came in from London, New York, and Johannesburg. Clients described her brand as more than fashion. It was a celebration of culture, strength, and resilience. Amara remained calm through it all, never forgetting her roots. She worked with local tailors, gave jobs to young designers, and always reminded her team, we are building something bigger than clothes. We are building pride. While Amara's star rose higher, Chiamaka's light dimmed. The company where she had once gloated about her promotion was struggling badly. Profits dropped, investors pulled out, and layoffs began. Chiamaka, once the favorite in the office, soon became a target. Her bosses blamed her for failed projects, and the protection she once enjoyed disappeared. One morning, she was called into a meeting and told her services were no longer needed. Just like that, the job she fought so dirty to keep was gone. The news spread quickly. In the same community where she once boasted about her power, whispers began to circle. Neighbors who had clapped for her success now shook their heads, saying, see how tables turn. Some even compared her directly to Amara, praising how one cousin had risen while the other had fallen. The humiliation was sharper than any knife. At family gatherings, the shift was obvious. Relatives who once cheered for Chiamaka now rushed to take pictures with Amara, proudly calling her our star. Chiamaka sat in the corner, quiet, her smile forced, her eyes burning with jealousy and shame. The cousin she once mocked for sewing in a tiny room was now the face of global recognition. Amara noticed all of this but never gloated. She didn't need to. Her silence was louder than any words she could have spoken. She had learned that revenge wasn't about shouting or fighting. It was about becoming everything they said you could never be. And now, the same cousin who once danced on her downfall was facing her own collapse, forced to taste the bitter reality of betrayal, pride, and karma. Chiamaka had never known what it felt like to beg. She had always been the one with the louder voice, the sharper tongue, the one who stood taller. But now, stripped of her job, her pride, and the admiration of her family, she found herself standing outside Amara's office, trembling. When she walked in and saw the elegant showroom, the busy staff, the walls decorated with Amara's success, her throat tightened. This was no longer the cousin she once mocked. This was a woman who had built an empire. Amara, she whispered, her voice breaking. Please, I need your help. I don't know where else to go. Amara looked at her for a long moment. 1,000 memories rushed back. The lies, the betrayal, the humiliation of watching Chiamaka take her promotion, the years of mockery. Now the same cousin who once laughed at her pain was standing before her, desperate and small. The family didn't make things easier. They called Amara, visited her, and begged her to forgive. She's your sister, her aunt pleaded. Don't leave her like this. Her uncle added, bring her into your company. Give her another chance. Everyone seemed to forget how deep the wound ran, how much Amara had suffered because of this same woman. Amara spent nights reflecting, torn between anger and compassion. Part of her wanted to turn Chiamaka away, to remind her of the mockery, the betrayal, the loneliness she had endured. But another part whispered that true victory wasn't about stepping on your enemies, it was about rising above them. One evening, she stood before her mirror, speaking to her own reflection as if to the whole world. Forgiveness does not mean forgetting, she said softly, her voice steady but full of emotion. It does not mean the pain disappears, or the betrayal is erased. Forgiveness means setting yourself free from anger, from bitterness, from the weight of the past. It means proving that the hurt did not break you. The next day, she invited Chiamaka into her office. The staff watched in silence as the two cousins faced each other. Chiamaka's eyes were red with shame, her voice barely audible. "I'll do anything, Amara. Just don't leave me like this." Amara's face remained calm. She didn't raise her voice, didn't show anger. Instead, she spoke with quiet strength. "I won't humiliate you, Chiamaka. I won't remind you of every wound you gave me, but you need to understand something. In this company, loyalty cannot be stolen. It is earned. And here, betrayal has no seat at the table." Chiamaka lowered her head, unable to reply. The message was clear. Amara had forgiven her enough not to crush her, but she would never allow the same poison into her new world. And in that moment, everyone watching understood. The real power was not in revenge, but in the grace to rise above it. Amara's brand kept rising until it was no longer just a Nigerian name, but a global one. Her designs were worn on runways in Paris and New York, her collections celebrated in magazines that once ignored African fashion. She became a symbol of pride, a woman who showed the world that Africa's beauty and strength could be stitched into fabric and worn like royalty. Everywhere she went, people introduced her as the designer who turned pain into power. In her company, Obinna proved himself loyal and hardworking. He never crossed the line of professionalism, and with time, he even admitted that he admired Amara's courage and leadership. He saw firsthand what true integrity looked like, and it humbled him. Under her guidance, he grew into a better man, grateful to be part of something bigger than himself. Meanwhile, Chiamaka's name slowly faded from conversations. The same family that once celebrated her turned quiet whenever her name came up. She became a shadow at gatherings, sitting silently as relatives praised Amara. Her downfall was not loud. It was slow, silent, and heavy. And with each passing day, she carried the weight of the lesson that betrayal never truly prospers. One evening, as the sun dipped low over Lagos, Amara walked past the old company building where she had once been betrayed. She paused for a moment, remembering the pain, the humiliation, the tears that once felt endless. But instead of sadness, a smile spread across her face. That place no longer defined her story. It was only the beginning of a much greater journey. Her final thought was clear. Betrayal may break you, but resilience will rebuild you stronger than ever. And with that, she walked away, free, victorious, unshaken.